The first hint of trouble came not as a shout, but as a whisper. A murmur on the wind that brushed past me one ordinary evening as I sat on the porch of my cabin, nestled deep within the embrace of the Pacific Northwest. It was a message, cryptic and unsettling, that arrived tucked inside an envelope with no return address. Only the name of a town I'd never heard of. Willow's End. A place, it seemed, where shadows stretched longer than the trees and whispers clung to the leaves. I remember the chill that danced up my spine as I read the note, the words etched in a hurried scrawl. They vanish into the night, leaving no trace but the echoes of their cries. We are haunted by what we cannot see. Help us. It was the kind of plea that gnawed at you, tugging at the edges of your conscience with sharp, insistent fingers. Arriving in Willow's End felt like stepping into a painting where the colors had begun to bleed. The town was draped in a shroud of grief and paranoia, its residents moving like specters among buildings that bore the weight of untold stories. They eyed me with a mixture of suspicion and desperation, their gazes heavy with unasked questions. I spent my first hours under the town's watchful eye, listening more than speaking, gathering threads of tales told in hushed tones. The locals spoke of shadows that seemed to flicker at the forest's edge, whispers that floated on the breeze, carrying with them the scent of decay and the sorrow of lost loved ones. And then there was the tannery, an abandoned relic from a bygone era, now nothing more than a husk, rumored to be cursed or haunted, perhaps both. Venturing to the sites of the disappearances by the waning light of day, I found myself ensnared in a landscape that felt charged with a silent warning. The ground bore the scars of crude traps, not meant for any beast known to man. And the trees. The trees were adorned with carcasses, twisted into grotesque parodies of life. It was a display of cunning intelligence, a morbid artistry that spoke of a predator unlike any I'd encountered. As night drew its dark veil over Willow's End, the forest seemed to come alive with an eerie symphony of sounds, animal cries that were somehow off, the faint rustle of movement just beyond the reach of sight, and the most chilling of all, the mimicry of human voices calling out, as if lost in the thick embrace of the woods. The message had been a lure, drawing me into the heart of a mystery where the line between hunter and hunted blurred. But as I stood there, amidst the whispering trees and watchful shadows, I felt the hunter's instinct awaken within me, a primal force that thrummed in my veins. This was more than a hunt. It was a challenge etched in the darkness, a puzzle woven through with strands of fear, grief, and an unspeakable menace. And I had been summoned to unravel it. Willow's End held its breath, waiting, watching, as I stepped further into the unknown. The hunt was on, and the shadows of the forest whispered my name. The morning sun had barely begun to pry its fingers through the dense canopy of Willow's End when I set out. The town behind me a tableau of quiet despair. The forest awaited, a living entity that watched with unseen eyes, its secrets cloaked beneath layers of mist and shadow. My task was clear, yet the path forward was shrouded in uncertainty. Each step a foray into the unknown depths of both the woods and the mystery they harbored. My plan, conceived in the early hours of dawn, was one of reversal, a hunter's gambit. I intended to turn the tables on the entity that had taken to stalking the fringes of humanity, using its own tactics against it. The evidence I had gathered the previous day spoke of an intelligence at work, a predator that delighted in the macabre manipulation of its prey. It was a creature of habit, returning to the scenes of its grotesque exhibitions. That predictability would be its downfall. I selected my site with care, an area dense with underbrush, yet offering a clear view of the approach. The forest around was thick with the sounds of awakening life, a stark contrast to the silence that had greeted my arrival in Willow's End. Here, in the heart of nature's domain, life thrummed with a vibrancy that belied the darkness lurking in its depths. The trap I constructed was a mimicry of the crude snares I had encountered, yet imbued with a hunter's cunning. baited with a fresh hide, it sent a potent lure. It was a challenge cast into the dark waters of the unknown, a question posed to the creature that haunted these woods. Would it bite, drawn by the promise of another skin to add to its collection? Concealment was key. I chose a vantage point nestled among the thick boughs of an ancient oak, its gnarled limbs a testament to the passage of time. From this perch, I could observe the trap, the forest floor a stage upon which the next act of this grim play would unfold. The waiting game began, a test of patience and will. As the shadows lengthened and the forest settled into an uneasy silence, I felt it. A prickling sensation on the back of my neck, an instinctual warning that I was no longer the sole predator in this domain. The skin taker was near, its presence a palpable weight in the air, a disturbance in the natural order. Peering through the foliage, I caught movement, a flicker of something almost human, yet undeniably other. Figures moved with a deliberate grace, their forms obscured by tattered skins that hung from their bodies like grotesque garments. The skin taker was real, and it was not alone. The night was alive with eerie mimicries, a psychological assault designed to fray the nerves and weaken resolve. Animal cries, the whispers of names long lost to the wind, all carried on the breeze in a symphony of madness. Yet, amid the cacophony, a singular focus remained. My trap lay untouched. The bait, a silent sentinel in the growing darkness. Dawn approached with the promise of revelation or despair. The trap remained unsprung, the bait untouched. Had the skin taker sensed my presence, understood my challenge, and chosen to abstain from the game? Or was this a deeper stratagem, a ploy to draw me further into its web of shadows and whispers? The first light of day brought no answers, only more questions. The forest, bathed in the soft glow of dawn, revealed no secrets, offered no clues to the whereabouts of the creature that had eluded me through the night. The trap, a testament to my efforts, stood as both a failure and a beacon of determination. Returning to Willow's End, the weight of the night's events hung heavy upon me. The trap had failed, but in its failure lay valuable insights. The skin taker was cunning, perhaps more so than any creature I had faced before. It was aware of my presence, of my intent. But rather than deter me, this realization only steeled my resolve. In the town's quiet streets, I found a renewed sense of purpose. The tales of the locals, once mere whispers of fear, now formed a pattern, a map that led to the heart of the darkness. The abandoned tannery, with its history steeped in the manipulation of skins, called to me, a siren song that promised answers or doom. As I made my way to the tannery, the town of Willow's End watched in silent anticipation. The battle lines were drawn, the stage set for a confrontation that would unravel the mystery of the skin taker. In the decay of the abandoned building, among the remnants of a forgotten trade, I would face the creature in its lair. The tannery loomed before me, its structure a shell of its former self, yet imposing in its desolation. Stepping into the shadow of the tannery, I prepared for what lay ahead, the echo of my footsteps a harbinger of the confrontation to come. The structure stood as a silent testament to better days, its once busy yards now overtaken by nature, the buildings themselves sagging under the weight of years and neglect. The air here held a stillness, a quiet that was unsettling rather than peaceful. It was as if the very land held its breath, waiting for the inevitable confrontation. Stepping cautiously over the threshold, I entered the tannery. The smell of decay was immediate and overwhelming, a physical presence that filled the air and coated the inside of my throat. The dim light from outside barely penetrated the interior, casting long shadows that seemed to move of their own accord. I moved through the tannery with deliberate care, every sense alert to the possibility of ambush. The building was a labyrinth of rooms and corridors, each turn revealing more of the tannery's grim history. Here, among the relics of its past operations, the skin taker had found its lair. And then, amidst the ruins and the remnants of skins long since processed, I found it. The nest. It was a scene of grotesque fascination. Skins were draped and hung with a care that spoke of obsession. The air thick with the scent of leather and something far less pleasant. This was the heart of the skin-taker's domain, a shrine to its twisted desires. The evidence of its recent presence was undeniable. Fresh skins that still bore the warmth of life. Tools laid out with meticulous care, and, most disturbingly, tokens that suggested the creature had been watching the town. Watching me. As I stood in the nest, the reality of my situation became clear. This was no wild beast I hunted, but something far more dangerous. A creature that walked the line between human and monster, its motivations as complex as they were horrific. In the dim heart of the tannery, as I surveyed the grotesque nest of the skin-taker, the air tensed around me like the calm before a storm. The first sign of the ambush was a whisper of movement, a shadow detaching itself from the darkness with lethal intent. The skin-taker emerged, a ghastly figure cloaked in stolen skins, its eyes burning with malevolence. The creature attacked with a speed that belied its horrific appearance, its movements a blend of human cunning and animal ferocity. I barely had time to react, the weight of my own equipment suddenly a cumbersome burden. The first exchange was a clash of forces, my knife meeting the creature's clawed hand in a shower of sparks. I danced back, trying to create space between us, but the skin-taker pressed forward relentlessly. It moved with a disturbing grace, each step calculated to cut off my escape routes, its attacks aimed not just to wound, but to incapacitate, to add my skin to its collection. The fight turned the tannery into a battleground of shadow and flame. I used what I could, throwing obstacles in the creature's path, old tanning racks, barrels, anything to slow its advance. But the skin-taker was relentless, swiping them aside with terrifying strength. Our battle was a symphony of violence, the sound of clashing metal, breaking wood, and the guttural snarls of the creature filling the air. The tannery bore witness to our struggle, the abandoned tools and remnants of its past life becoming weapons in our deadly dance. As the creature lunged, I sidestepped, feeling the rush of air as its claws swiped inches from my flesh. I countered with a thrust of my knife, the blade slicing through the air with a precision born of desperation. The skin-taker recoiled, its stolen skins parting to reveal the ghastly wound. For the first time, I saw pain flash across its all-too-human eyes, but pain turned quickly to rage. The skin-taker roared, a sound that was both human and beast, charging with renewed fury. Our battle raged on, a test of endurance and will. With each exchange, I learned more of the creature's tactics, its movements becoming predictable, its strategy clear. In the climax of our confrontation, the skin-taker made a fatal misstep. Driven by fury, it overextended, leaving itself open. Seizing the opportunity, I launched a counterattack, driving the creature back with a series of rapid strikes designed to disorient and wound. It was then I made my move. Using the last of my strength, I maneuvered the creature toward the center of the tannery, where the remnants of chemicals and dried skins lay in wait. With a flick of my wrist, I ignited a flare, tossing it into the volatile mix. In the chaos, the tannery began to collapse, its aged structure succumbing to the fire. Amidst the smoke and falling debris, I realized this battle could only end in one way. As the skin-taker howled in fury, its form silhouetted against the inferno, a plan crystallized in my mind. A final, desperate gambit to ensure this monster would no longer haunt the living. Seizing a sharp piece of metal from the floor, I used it as a spear and charged forward. The skin-taker, caught off guard by my sudden assault, barely had time to react as I thrust forward with all my strength. The impact impaled it onto a heavy wooden beam, directly in the heart of the blaze. The flames enveloped the creature in an instant, its howls of pain and rage a terrible symphony that rose above the crackling of the fire. The stolen skins that cloaked its body caught fire, the flames consuming flesh and fabric alike. The skin-taker thrashed in a vain attempt to escape, but the fire was relentless. As the structure threatened to collapse entirely, I retreated, the heat of the blaze pressing against my back. I spared one last glance over my shoulder, witnessing the end of the skin taker. Its movements slowed, the fire consuming it until nothing remained but ash and ember. The inferno had claimed its due, the monster that had terrorized Willow's End reduced to nothing more than a memory. As dawn broke, casting a gentle light through the dense canopy of the forest, I stood before the smoldering ruins of the tannery, the final battleground of my confrontation with the skin taker. The night's events played back in my mind, a tumultuous clash of hunter and hunted, culminating in a blaze that consumed the creature's grotesque lair. Yet, as the fire died down and the first rays of sunlight pierced the smoke, a palpable silence enveloped the clearing. It was over. The battle had been fierce, a test of every skill I possessed. The skin taker, a creature of nightmares, had met its end in the flames, its reign of terror extinguished. As I surveyed the scene, the weight of my exhaustion became apparent, each breath a reminder of the night's exertion. But beneath the fatigue, there was relief. The town of Willow's End, haunted for so long by the shadow of the skin taker, could now find peace. I approached the charred remains of the tannery with caution, the air still hot with the embers of the night's inferno. There, amidst the ash and ruin, lay the evidence of the creature's demise. Scorched bones, twisted and deformed, were all that remained of the skin taker. Its stolen skins, once worn as a macabre cloak, now lay in tatters, an eerie testament to its final moments. The fire had been thorough, leaving no doubt as to the creature's fate. As the reality of the victory sank in, a sense of solemnity took hold. The skin taker, for all its horror, had been a victim of its own twisted nature, a being caught between worlds, unable to belong to either. In its pursuit of identity, it had become a monster. A fate I pondered as the forest around me woke to a new day, free from the shadow that had darkened its depths. As I prepared to leave Willow's End, a sense of closure accompanied me. The skin taker was gone, its threat neutralized. Yet the journey was far from over. The world is vast, filled with shadows that hide creatures both strange and terrible. And I would continue to walk the thin line that separates our reality from the darkness. The road ahead was uncertain, each horizon promising new challenges, new hunts. But for now, Willow's End could breathe again, its nightmare over. As for me, the hunt goes on. Driven by the knowledge that where there is darkness, there will always be a need for those willing to confront it.